Hi, I'm Mim Senf from Global Women for Wellbeing. Welcome to a special episode of our Heart to Heart series. We are so excited today to have some of our youngest and most inspiring members join us for a conversation. They're going to be sharing with us today their perspective on how we start to meaningfully address the gender equity issue, particularly in the world that we're in now. We are so excited to have these young and inspiring leaders with us today. So Chris, I will turn the conversation over to you.
Thank you, Mim. It is so wonderful to be here with these young voices. And this is only, Mim and I believe, the beginning of the expansion of the young voices. So please do go out and talk to your friends and have them come on board to be with the GW4W family. And first of all, I want to say that all of you are part of the GW4W family, and I thank you very, very much. Your voice means so much to us. First of all, I'm going to introduce the young leaders, and I'm going to start out with Saliha, which she loves to be pronounced or called Sally, don't you? And her last name is Abdulrahman. Then we have Mia Clarke. Do you want to just give a wave? Then we have Anneli Brett. We have Sarah Jane Hughes. And we have Helen Watterson. We are going to have an insightful and actionable conversation. These are the voices for change. They are the next generation. I first want to start off and say on September 18th, the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Gator, sorry.
Gator, yeah.
Gator died at the age of 87. She said on the fight of equality, women have achieved true equality when men share with them the responsibility of bringing up the next generation. So I'm going to start off and I'm going to ask, how do you think gender inequality affects you now? And can I start off with Sally? How do you think it affects you now?
I feel like it's kind of in like terms of thinking of what I'm going to do in the future, especially now that I'm in uni. So actually, when I was thinking of the answer of this question, I remembered I read a student article a few weeks ago, I think. And in the article, the student said that statistically, more women actually apply and take on like higher education than men. But when it comes to actually getting the job, it's mostly men that actually use those degrees to get jobs or get job offers. And she said that mostly it was on the basis that a lot of employers thought that, you know, due to commitment, a lot of women may not get, you know, the balance or something. Like if they want to start a family, they might leave that field or that employment and start a family. So I've just been, you know, it's kind of been at the back of my mind. I've just been hoping and praying that, you know, wherever I want to end up in the future doesn't use that as a criteria to employ women or have women work for them, because it's really a baseless criteria. And, you know, I like to look at myself in the future and say, yeah, I would like a family, but I don't want that to hinder my work as well. So that's what I've been thinking of. But I think we're working towards actually having women as at the forefront of employment, at the forefront of jobs that were before like just filled with men. So hopefully by the time I actually have education, it shouldn't be much of a problem anymore.
Sarah Jane, would you like to add on to that?
So I have no idea what school is like for anybody else on this call, but in Ireland, I go to an all-girls school and gender inequality affects my subject choices. The only practical subjects that my school offers are home ec, music and art, But if you look at the boys' school across the road from my school, they have woodwork and metalwork and technology, and we have no opportunity to study subjects like this. But obviously in the future, gender inequality will have a much greater impact on me looking for a job, and it's much harder for women to get promoted in the workplace. And obviously it's a fact that women don't get paid as much as men. So that's how it'll affect me in the future.
Thank you for that. Mia, would you like to add on anything?
In my personal experience, I used to go to a girls' school, but now I've moved to a mixed school because obviously girls' schools for me may be very uncomfortable because we're not living in a single-sex world. We are living in a multicultural, multi-general world. So we should not be focusing on one sex, one gender. And I think that for things to change, I would say we need males, especially boys our age, to understand that calling us certain things, saying certain things about women are just not okay because they're old concepts and they really shouldn't exist anymore.
Agree. Anneli, do you want to add in anything?
Well, I go to a mixed school, and it's quite equal, but there are a lot of boys and there's teachers that make different comments. Like the amount of times that teachers have said, oh, we need to move the tables now, we need a bunch of strong boys to do that. And I'm there like, excuse me, like I can lift a table, it's not that heavy. I just think that we just have to really stand up and speak out when it's wrong. Because at school, if we can do that at school, then we'll be able to do that in the workforce.
And Helen, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, so I go to the same school as Anneli, and what Sally was saying about, in the future, if you decide to have children, you want to be treated equally, you don't want to be treated differently, especially if you decide that you don't want to do part-time after you have children, or you don't want to take time off. You just want to ensure that, you're not being discriminated against because of that.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for sharing a lot of that. And I can echo that for many of us when we were your age, these were some of the same concerns. And so I think that the real message here is it's time for change. We've been talking about this for decades. Why are all of you still dealing with the same issues that some of us dealt with, 20, 30, 40 years ago? And so we're at a point where we really need to change what happens. We need to do more than talk about this. And so a lot of that is changing it early on. And I really appreciate you bringing up how the gender issue is about across the gender arc. Whether you're male, female, non-binary, however you identify, we all do better. We can authentically be ourselves and have intentional inclusion. So I think some of this has also been brought even more into focus because of the pandemic. And I know for all of you in school, I think there's an even, we really see you having as an additional layer of stressors on you because of just the different scheduling and everything else that you've been going on. So I think it'd be really helpful if you could share with our audience what it's been like for you as students during this pandemic, and physically, mentally, some of the challenges. And if there is a positive, if there is a silver lining for any of you, we're always happy to hear that as well. So who'd like to share something that's their experience? Anneli,
for me, sorry.
So just jump in.
Okay. For me, I went into the pandemic in my old school, the girls' school, and that was a very bad experience for me because I did get bullied for lots of reasons, such as people were very xenophobic to me because I'm of mixed heritage. So I went into the pandemic thinking, oh, I'm going to come back to this place. But my mental health did deplete a lot. My anxiety definitely increased, and I can still see that today. But luckily, I think there was a silver lining, which was that I managed to get into my current school, which was great because it gave me a better outlook on the future and what things might be like coming out of the lockdown. So I would say overall, the lockdown wasn't great for me, but it did teach me that it's important to have social contact for one thing, but also to look upon the future as a positive, not a negative.
Great.
That is an important message, Mia, is that look at the future as a positive, not a negative, you know. So already, I think the young people today are really, really getting good experience through this pandemic that will give you resilience in the future.
Well, yeah, and some people refer to that as grit, which I think is an interesting word. Yeah. You know, how do you build that inner strength?
Yes.
Not only, and you're right. I think, you know, so I'd be very interested to hear from some of you. What do you think about that? Does it feel like that to you going through this experience? You know, this pandemic and this kind of new world that we're in. How is that impacting your view of how you think you're going to function in the future?
In the future.
Yeah,
Helen, do you want to say something on that?
I think that it's definitely been a teacher of how to manage changes, being ready to, you know, embrace uncertainty. You know, sometimes in life you don't know what's coming in the future, and it's just been learning to take care of yourself so that you're ready to embrace change, and also taking care of other people as well so that they feel ready, and just having that open discussion.
Yeah, that's very powerful words, actually. You know, again, I'm hearing kind of that support network as well, taking care of yourself, but having people around you as well to help you through difficult times.
Well, I think that's a good question too. So from in terms of taking care of yourself, is there anything that you're doing differently for yourself now than what you were doing, you know, prior to the pandemic? So it really gets to how you're feeling around mental and physical health. I know anxiety is a big part of it, not just for younger people. Honestly, I'm hearing this across the board with everybody in our network. But I think that to Chris's point here, the opportunity to learn some of these skills, how to navigate some of this through uncertainty now, as opposed to trying to learn it when you're 30 or 40, is probably going to hold you in very good stead. And frankly, there's a part of me that kind of wishes I would have had more of that, you know, when I was your age. So you know, again, if somebody like to share something that they're doing for themselves, are you exercising, watching sleep? Has it impacted the way you eat?
I think, oh, sorry.
Oh, that's all right. So go ahead.
I was just going to say that it just made me appreciate like normal day-to-day life, and just really be able to reach out to family and friends, like, and not take it for granted, and just stop stressing about things in the future, and just living in the present moment and taking each day. And if you don't feel like doing something today, then it's fine. You don't have to feel guilty about it. And just taking care of yourself and really reaching out to everyone else as well.
And you like going on walks as well, don't you?
Yeah, just being outside really makes a difference. And like listening to music as well, it's really helpful. And just making sure you're talking to people and reaching out.
Yeah, and Sarah Jane, you were going to say something?
Yeah, well, I'm a very sporty person, and I got that taken away from me. So I've been going outside and walking and trying to get my exercise in. That really helped me as well.
Yeah, Sally, how about you?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that obviously, because now I'm not actually going into campus, and it's not like I'm in accommodation, so I'm not really surrounded by other peers. So it's bad in a way, like I've not been surrounded by other people to help that support network. But I guess the silver lining to it is that I have more time now. So what I've started doing that I didn't do before is actually physically wrote down my goals And almost every day, I try to make it every day, but sometimes every other day, I just journal at the end of the day on like how I felt today, how I felt in terms of my productivity, in terms of how hard the work was, in terms of how well I think I'm doing from when I first started uni and everything. And I feel like just reading through, especially my goals, I try to make it like I read it through every morning. It kind of puts me in that mindset, okay, I'm ready to do this. Like, it doesn't matter that I don't have people around me. I've kind of learned to motivate myself. So yeah, I think that's definitely helped me because of the extra time that I've had because of the pandemic.
Yeah, some really great advice. And I think, you know, it's really interesting listening to what I would call like a more mindful way of your life, like being aware of what's happening maybe in a way that you know you weren't prior. And honestly, I think these are words of wisdom for everyone at any age. So this idea of writing down goals and what are your goals around that, giving yourself that space and not stressing about things as much, I think is tremendous. And I know as somebody who also likes to be very active, you know, what alternatives do you have out there? If we can't do the things that we were used to doing in the past, what can we do, you know, to fill that space in a meaningful and, you know, an important way? But I also appreciate the social connection piece that you brought up, because I think we all know, you know, and that's the science behind, you know, we are social beings. Evolutionary biology tells us, right, that we survive. So how, you know, this balance between safe social distancing in our crazy world right now, but managing to find intentional ways of staying socially connected.
I'm just interested in this whole with the mental well-being. Does anybody want to like share if they took up a hobby or if they already had done a hobby and they continued to do it because they had more time? Does anybody want to share what they did? Because that's also helping with well-being. Sally?
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, do you want to go on? Yeah, I can talk afterwards.
No, you can go. It's fine. Don't worry.
Okay.
This is what women do. We're very polite with each other.
Very. At the beginning of lockdown, around March, because I was in A-levels, doing A-levels, but we didn't have exams, so I had plenty of free time. And I actually started painting, which I had never done before, but I'd always wanted to do. But because of A-levels, I couldn't do it. So I started painting, and I turned that into like a little business just for a while until I started uni. And it was good. At first, it was for fun, and then I started selling them. But then I'd find that whenever I'd paint landscapes, especially, it would just be so calming and like relaxing. And then you just see this stuff, and obviously you can't see it in real life, but then whenever I would just look at what I'm painting, it would make me even more grateful that, you know, we have these types of, like, the earth is like just innately beautiful for us and all that stuff. So I would definitely recommend painting to anyone who wants to be more mindful, especially landscapes, because as well as it being fun, it is just so relaxing. I love it.
Thank you for that. Mia, would you like to add on to that?
I'm also doing art a lot. I've always done drawing and writing, so that really does help me relax. I find that writing, because my writing is impacted mostly by my life, the characters, so that's really helpful for me. But drawing is just, as you said, it's really mindful. Painting, drawing, it's just relaxing. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Emily, do you want to add anything?
Well, we always try to start doing 3 things that we're grateful for at the end of the day. So that was really nice to reflect on, like, the smaller things during lockdown.
Sarah Jane?
Well, I played a bit of guitar before lockdown, but over lockdown I really got stuck into it, and it was actually really nice. Like, it was an escape from the news, and you could get lost in the music and everything, so it was really nice.
And Helen, what about yourself?
I started doing meditation. So before, you know, the idea of silence just kind of made me, you know, a bit uncomfortable sitting there just being surrounded by your thoughts. But actually, I found that it's kind of the opposite. It's a way to, you know, not think about anything and just embrace the world as it is, as silence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Again, I think the tools that everybody has and what they do, if you can continue to use that, you know, as you get older, you're going to be set up in such an amazing place to really, you know, have your voice, stand tall, and really work through anything that comes at you. So I think it's absolutely beautiful. I want to now move on to racial inequality and Black Lives Matter. It's an issue that GW4W has spoken about with some of our senior leadership team. As we know, this issue intersects with closing the gender gap. What have you seen or heard that has made you want to speak openly on addressing racism? And can I start with Sally on that one?
Yeah, of course. To be honest, I feel like I've always spoken out about racial inequality, both on social media and with my friends when I was in secondary school. But it's clear that there's been a rise in awareness now this year due to the tragic murder of George Floyd, which shouldn't have really had to happen for people to want to talk about it more. But I guess most, if not all, movements start after some tragedy or another. But definitely seeing that on the news and seeing how I felt like it was like natural for people to want to feel sympathy for this man that was just, you know, killed for no reason. But then just seeing so many people online just being negative and saying comments like, oh, he should have just listened to the police, or they deserve what they get and things like that. And I'm just like, you really don't know what's going on. So I'm just like, yeah. So I feel like seeing things like that definitely has made me want to go out and talk even, you know, more and more openly to address this stuff, because it's clear that people are thinking this way, not because they are malicious or anything, but just because they don't know. So definitely with a rise of knowledge comes a rise of awareness. And yeah, I think that's why.
Thank you, Sally. Mia, would you like to add on your thoughts?
Yeah, in school and obviously at home, I am like always talking about Black Lives Matter, about racism, because I personally experienced racism, so I understand how hurtful it is. And yes, I agree with Sally about it, that it shouldn't have to be one person dies to trigger a whole scale of people remembering everyone else that died. In terms of the movement, I would say that I'm very affected, obviously, by the media, because you see there is, for instance, a Black person commits fraud, or they try to get their child into a better school, and their crime is measured up against a white person's who has murdered 5 people. So I think there's just such an exaggeration of what people compare different cultures and races to. And I would say that people need to understand the actual effect this has on many communities, because obviously it's absolutely awful and it should not be happening at all. But I'm glad there's such a big movement. I'm glad that everyone is getting involved. Yeah.
It's just sad that something has to happen like this for, you know, it to be,
Yeah.
you know, to shout this loud. You know, it should have, you know, we should all work together to make this happen all the time. But again, we have to continue to have a voice, so we continue to make changes. Anneli, did you want to add on to that?
Well, because it was all over social media, it was a lot. It made me a lot more aware than I was before. Because of course I knew that there was always inequality, but it made me really see lots of statistics that really opened my eyes, and I was just like, what is this? Like, why is this a thing? Like, I saw statistics that was Black school leavers are paid 14% less than white ones, and that's just ridiculous. Like, why? And it's all just because of the color of your skin. And It's just, at the end of the day, we're all human. We should all be equal no matter what, because we're all on this planet. So why should we spend time making it unequal?
Yeah. Sarah Jane?
So just on what Anneli said there, like I'm much more aware of racism and all this stuff that's happening, like after hearing about it, because you wouldn't hear or see it much in Ireland. It's disgusting, and it hurt me to see that this is still happening in our world, and it's still going on. Like, this isn't 60 years ago, this is now, this is today, and it really disgusts me.
Yeah, it's something that should never have happened. It really shouldn't. Helen?
Definitely, I agree that, it's 2020 and this is still a huge issue. In school, when we've been learning about the civil rights movement, thinking that was, quite some time ago, and still these issues haven't been solved. But really for me, it's been hearing just, what Black people have to experience, and not just Black people, other minorities as well have to experience on a daily basis. People instantly assuming that they're criminal, microaggressions, and it's just breaking, really.
Well, and I think I really appreciate the fact that you shared how much social media has started to change this conversation. And I think it's also good to see people from different races standing together on this issue, which I think was part of the problem. And, plus the fact that I truly believe that your generation has gotten a lot louder.
Yeah.
And so this is not acceptable. And I think it does get back to, when you study this, right, we can put policies and laws into place, but if we're not dealing with systemic racism, or really digging into, how do we actually apply these policies? How do we reach the hearts and minds of people that may have been taught something from childhood that just isn't true? And how do we do that in a way so that we can lock elbows to have a more sustainable world together? And I think, again, it's from all the studies that I've seen about all of you and your generation, you're much more aware of what this is. You have far fewer barriers than my generation have. So I think that's incredibly hopeful. And I know that all of you are out there speaking up about this. And I think also what you've all collectively brought up is that, again, you have to honor diversity in all the different ways it shows up, right? All of us bring a different voice, whether it's from a religious background, an ethnic background, geographic background, depending on where we grew up around the world. But we are all human. And so when we can bring those amazing gifts that, like all of you I know are already bringing to your communities and speaking out, this is how things change. This is how we can truly move towards intentional inclusion. Not just, hey, we've got people from different backgrounds, in a particular room, but that everybody in that room has equal voice and respect.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate so much. I know for some of you, this is a very personal experience. And then for others of us, obviously there are things that we've learned, and we've learned fairly recently. But together we can start to make this change. So I just am so really inspired by your commitment to speaking up and speaking out. I truly believe that it is about the guys on the other side too, because unfortunately, we know many of them are in leadership positions, so they need to be more than just allies, they need to be partners in this change. And with all of you reaching out to them and doing that, then we stand a much better chance of moving that forward. But it has to happen if we're going to have a sustainable world. And just so appreciate your passion for this. So of course, for us, we love to raise awareness, but we're also really, really big on action steps, because as you all just pointed out, how long have we been talking about racism and gender inequality and how do we close the gap here? We must have the data, but I'd love to hear from all of you. what's an action step either you've taken or you want to take in the next year or two, or something that you think that can be done in schools that can start to change the future in a very positive way? So maybe Helen, how about if we start with you?
I think that the main thing that you can do is really, as well as educating yourself, it's just taking that time to listen and then thinking about what they're saying and then listening to your own language, your own thoughts, making sure that your own language isn't potentially harmful to others.
Well said. Well said, Sarah Jane.
I think because we're still in school, I think the first step should be just educating people on what's happening and hearing from people who have experienced gender equality and racism. I think that'd be really beneficial, and I think that is the first step that we need to take, is just to learn and to be educated on these subjects.
Agreed. Agreed. Sally?
I think that especially in schools, one thing that can be done is normalizing actually learning about, you know, systematic injustices in both racism and, you know, gender issues in, you know, schools. Like the only time that you'd really ever learn about problems facing different genders or different races is in a history class. If you were like, you know, learning about, you know, before gender equality laws or racial equality laws. And that like kind of puts a mindset into students that, oh, this is just history, like it's not happening anymore, when it is. So definitely making it normal to learn about the current situation between both races and genders and what they face in workplaces, with profiling and all that stuff. Like yesterday, I was actually watching the news with my parents, and Prince Harry was on it, and he explained that he didn't know the extent to his privilege and the problem of racial profiling before he met Meghan and before he saw the world through her eyes. So it just shows that education is a lot, and learning about it, not just hearing about it in history lessons, but actually seeing it happen and talking to people that it actually happens to, definitely could make a change.
Yeah, and I appreciate the intersectionality piece of this, because again, sometimes we talk about like racism and diversity, we talk about gender over here, as opposed to if I am Black and female and gay, then I fall into multiple categories. It's not just a particular one. And so I think you're right. I think the opportunity to really explore what these things look like on their own, but also where they interconnect, and so that we can have more of a systems thinking approach to some of the, you know, the answers for the future. So Marilyn, would love to hear.
Oh, sorry, it's me. It's my mum's computer. That's why.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm looking at.
It's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. I would say that from my personal experience, I have experienced a lot of, because I'm from 4 places, so I've experienced a lot of racism and xenophobia quite a lot in my old school. And I think that people just need to be not bystanders, but active bystanders. So stand up for what you believe in, but also respect other people's beliefs, religions, sexualities, genders, because you don't know what anyone else is going through, and it would not be okay to just assume. So I think the main thing is to be an active bystander and make sure that you're being respectful.
Wonderful. Anneli? Oh, I was going to give Anneli a word in here.
Oh, sorry, go
on. Well, just following on from that, I think we should just be really honest and open, and just having more open conversations at school or wherever we are, just about gender inequality, racial inequality, and everything. Just being more open so that people who are really struggling to accept something about themselves, they feel like they can talk to people about it and not be looked down upon.
May I ask you, Anneli, I know that you had a particular situation at school, like more gender related. Would you be willing to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think we might be talking about the one last year. When I was in year 10, I basically had heard my one of my teachers talking to just the boys about this like work experience thing, and because it was seen as like a more boy related kind of job, the girls weren't asked, and it was in my science as well, and because I'm doing separate science, there's only 7 girls in the class. So it was just the fact that we were never asked, and then I found out after it was closed, so I was just never able to sign up for it anyway. But I was kind of feeling a bit hopeless about it because I didn't feel like there was much I could do. I was kind of shocked that would happen.
Well, and I really appreciate you sharing that, because again, we still have this underlying bias about what women do in terms of jobs and what men do. And yet there are multiple examples out there of amazing women in STEM that are winning Nobel Prizes, that are climbing the biggest mountains, that are, doing things that we are more than capable. And I don't know how many of you know that for many years they didn't think women could run marathons, as an example. Flat out, they weren't, women could never run this. We can't possibly have, so I think that, also understanding the history, women during World War II, at least in the UK and in America, women were going in and, being Rosie the Riveter and doing these jobs at years, or the princess from the UK who's fixing engines in a Jeep. I still find that to be like this amazing story. But how then magically, when the men came back, we were suddenly expected to kind of go back into this more traditional role. Yeah. And that's we've had this kind of push and shove and push and shove and push and shove over the past, 10, 20, 30 decades. But where the world is right now, when we talk about sustainability, sustainable world, having future leaders that understand how to build consensus and bring in these diverse voices is going to be key to how this world survives, how we do peace building around the world, how economies survive. And so I agree, Anneli, and speaking up about this, and when you see it, calling it out, not you. And again, I'm a big believer. So I will share this little short story, and I know you know this, but I actually did this exact thing when I was very young, when I was still in school. This was before girls were, where they had girls sports teams. And so in the United States, we had Title IX that came through. And I was in a rural school, and I had a friend who was an amazing basketball player. This girl, I'm a terrible basketball player. She's amazing. And she's, and I could say, why can't she go play? Like, why isn't there a team for her? I mean, she's clearly very good. And my mom said, well, you can do a petition, and said, this is what a petition is, and this is how you get people, and this is how you get organized. And it was my first lesson in people saying, this will never change. Why are you even doing this? All the pushback. The good news is that in our case, we were able to get most of the student body and half the teachers to sign it. And because Title IX was on our side, Justine was allowed to try out for the boys basketball team. They didn't give us money for a girls team, but she was allowed to try out. And she played first string. That's how good, yeah. So I think it's the lesson that all of us, you don't always win these battles, but calling it out and speaking up and standing together is a great way for us to continue to make change. And I just applaud all of you really for the voices that talking to friends, talking to teachers, and doing this. This is how change happens.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say, with Mia, can you tell everybody the different countries that you...
Oh, okay. Well, I'm German, Jamaican, Italian, Romanian.
Wow.
So...
We're international.
Sorry.
That's wonderful.
Thank you. But yeah, it was difficult because everyone in my old school was very racist and xenophobic, and there was not a big cultural diversity. It was a school dominated by one culture, one religion, which was very suffocating, really, and stifling, because it meant that no one could express themselves. There was a lot of homophobia as well. So it was very difficult for a lot of people, and it was ridiculous, really. So, yeah.
I want to ask you, with that school, was it more that was a school values and they brought in certain students, or was it because that's how they were kind of educated in their upbringing, so to say, within their family?
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. It was more of their family upbringing, their education. They came to school not really, even though me and some of my friends, we did stand up against all of this racism, sexism, because it was actually, funnily enough, quite sexist. They were very opposed to boys, which was strange, really, because we're all, in one world. So I think that it was definitely to do with their upbringing, not exactly the school, but the school did not exactly try and help them either. So, yeah.
Very, very interesting. And that's why we have to, as, young voices, you guys, we need to keep having our voice and educating people that, hold on a second, we are one, we live in one world, let's all work together for peace. It's so, so important. I was going to ask you, as a student, what steps would you like to see schools take to help with students? So it leads nicely onto this question, understanding and addressing inequality, biases, and racism. And Helen, let's start with you.
I think that definitely schools need to create kind of a safe environment so that if someone is subject to sexism and racism, that they feel comfortable coming forward and knowing that their issues will be thoroughly dealt with, and it's not dealt with in a way that will put them at further harm. I think it's just creating that supportive environment where conversation can happen and that you're not kind of hiding away from sharing what you're going through.
Do you feel your school offers that?
I do think that there is a supportive environment that you should go and tell someone if you feel like something's not right. So yeah, I would say it does have quite a kind of safe environment.
Yeah, it's so important that there is that safe space to be your genuine, authentic self. Sarah Jane, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think like in my school we have a 1 hour class once a week, diversity and equality class, and I think it's really good, and we just get to talk and we get to hear individual stories and share them as well, and it's really beneficial, and you get to learn yourself and then know how to approach someone who's having these problems and talk to them about it. So I think that's really good, and that should be brought in a lot of schools around the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Sally? Yeah. Sally, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, you cut off for a second. Okay. I think definitely in schools, making it a norm to call out and sanction both students and teachers who make derogatory comments about either race or gender or, any other type of quality that might make you a minority, because lots of people might get away with things like this because the schools don't do anything, or they feel it's a taboo to bring it up or something. People might grow up with these type of mindsets that it's okay to say these type of things, and they go into their workplaces doing the same things. Like I remember some teachers when I was in secondary school, they would do things that just they're not outright, just they're not okay. Like there was one of my teachers that actually compared one terrorist bomber a few years ago, actually, the one that was in the Manchester terror attack in the Ariana Grande concert, and then she compared him to all Muslims. I was like, wow, really, in a class where you have Muslim students? Yeah. And there's some, like 2 years ago, there's some teachers that normally teachers aren't supposed to share their political views with students, especially if there's some students which they know will they will offend. But there were some students that were, some teachers that were Trump supporters, and they'd have the hats and they'd, put it on students and things like that. And like, these actions need to be actively called out so people know that it's not okay. Because once they feel like it's okay, they're going to continue and they're not going to see anything wrong with it, which puts the people that are seen as minorities in the receiving end of these actions, and it's just not right. So yeah.
Completely agree. Anneli, would you like to add on?
Well, I think that's just highlighting like the teacher-student gap, and like when a teacher says, especially teachers, I mean students need to be careful what they're saying, obviously, but when a teacher says it, you kind of feel like you can't call them out because you're not, they're like higher up than you. But like, we're all human, we should be able to call them out. And like, there have been several comments that different teachers have made, and I had to go and speak to someone about it because it just wasn't right. And they shouldn't, just because they're a teacher doesn't mean that they have complete authority over everything. And like, what, even talking about like their private life and their partners and stuff, like, that's just unnecessary in the classroom, and it should just be focused on education, not talking about political views and all that kind of thing. Like, even when they're teaching, you shouldn't be relating it to different things because that's unnecessary and you shouldn't do that. It's just wrong. And so we need to really try and call out teachers for different comments. I think it starts from the teachers. If the teachers are making those comments, then the students are going to follow along. And so if we're not calling out the teachers, then that's where the problem is going on.
And Mia, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, I agree. And I would say that the progress needs to be in terms of course, support, but I would say also education in terms of the history curriculum needs to be replenished because there is no Black history. It's very Eurocentric. And I think that just leads to people being uneducated, and therefore, as everyone knows, history impacts the future. So if we don't know the history of things, we're just going to not be able to change anything in terms of racism and sexism. And I would say teachers also need to understand how one action or one word can impact a student very much, because they're quite unsympathetic to what people are experiencing. And I would say they need to be more inclusive in how they deal with students making complaints or venting to teachers.
I think sometimes, we're all human, and sometimes we actually speak before we think. And I think it's a general lesson to keep in your mind and, make sure that we always do think before we actually speak. And it's something teachers need to do. We all need to do. And sometimes that's not always easy, but I think if we feel very strongly about something, if you say it in the right language to a teacher, they should take that on board. And that's the way you're going to do as well.
Yeah.
And do your bit.
Yeah, and I think there's very specific things that all of you called out about this. I think that just hearing you talk about this, there needs to be education with the teachers. So that, like in any organization, whether you're in a business or in a school, it's still a working environment. And so I do think that it's incumbent upon the administration to make sure that teachers and administrators not just go through bias training, but I think they really should be going through bias testing.
Yes.
Too often we pretend that we understand without really deeply understanding and owning where we're coming from.
Yeah.
And, hopefully it's not done through finger pointing, right? I mean, if you were raised a particular way, we've heard this from male counterparts, right? I was raised to be this kind of a man. My society, my culture told me I was supposed to be this. So this is confusing and scary for me. And so giving and this gets back, I think, Anneli, to what you were saying, safe space. right? How do we build these safe spaces to have honest, transparent conversation? But in a situation where it's teacher versus student, there's an inequity of power in that room. And so it's even more important for those teachers to be the leaders and role modeling for all of the students. Their listening skills, in my mind, should be even better than anybody else in the room. They're the adults. And, but I mean, you know, I mean, the reality is that sometimes some of them are not the leaders that you need to be. And so I think the other thing is, as you kind of alluded to, is that these schools have to have a very clear way of students being able to identify those problems, not feel like you cannot speak out, safely speak out. And I agree with you, Chris, too, how we language, because I know we all get emotional, you know, especially if it hit you personally. Yeah. And I'm a pretty passionate person by nature. And so I think those words of wisdom about, can we take that minute to pause and think about the language that we want to share, you know, and put that forth out there into the world. And then in some cases too, and I think Mia, you know, your story about having to move to a different school, sometimes it's important to move away from a toxic environment. Yeah. And sometimes we fight so hard to be in a place to make a change, but for your own health and well-being.
That's definitely what happened, yeah.
Find a tribe. Find your tribe, your family, your support group around you. Because if you're standing by yourself, no matter how strong you are, it's a whole lot tougher. You know, we talked about Ruth Bader Ginsburg at the beginning, and for those of you that know the name John Lewis, who was very involved in the civil rights movement in the United States, he was 15 years old. 15 years old when he marched across that bridge in Selma, Alabama, taking on huge risk, and yet he was part of making tremendous change. And in fact, I actually saw in a documentary that when they were the civil rights movement in the United States, when they were deciding whether or not they were going to let younger people march because they knew the potential for violence. Yeah. The discussion was they are already experiencing this, so they should be able to make that decision as to whether or not they want to take this risk. And that's why we are so grateful, because we know younger voices make the difference. We know that you're the ones that are going to, you know, take it farther. And just so inspired, truly, by everything that all of you are doing. As Chris said, we really want to invite more younger voices from around the world to join us. We are grateful for your comments back about, you know, some of our wine and tea events, because we know you're listening to some of these older leaders, seasoned leaders, and we hope that some of that wisdom, you won't have to go through some of the barriers that we had to go through. But at the same time, we need to learn a lot from all of you. And in this way, together, we can build that sustainable world. So we are, again, thank you, with a deep sense of gratitude from the GW4W leadership team for being a part of our family, for sharing your voices, and for all the good that you are doing. The one thing I thought might be interesting, and we didn't have this on the agenda, but I think it might be fun for our audience to hear, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Like, what's the career? And you don't have to say a particular profession, but what are some of the things that you're looking to the future to do?
Anneli? Well, I'm really interested in like medical, or like just something medical, just helping people and speaking out. I think that would just be really interesting.
Fantastic. Amia?
I'm writing a book, so I'd really like to publish my book and hopefully become an illustrator as well. That would be really fun.
What is your book about?
So it's set in the Second World War, and funnily enough, it's actually impacted by a lot of the issues we've been talking about today. It's about these twins that find themselves in a very tricky situation, a long plot, but I'm very interested in the Second World War, so that's definitely impacted my writing, but I'd hope to be a writer, so yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm not so sure 100% because I am studying law, so hopefully I would like to become a solicitor. But I think in 10 years, I kind of want to be working for myself in a more creative environment. So I have actively been taking steps to having like my own sort of business in the future that would form as work, but at the same time I would thoroughly enjoy it because it would let me kick into my creative side. So yeah.
Helen?
I'm not sure yet either, but I would definitely like to raise awareness about like mental health issues, not only in females but in males as well. And yeah, other than that, I'm not really sure.
Oh, that's great. And Sarah Jane?
I'm not too sure either, but I think maybe something in computer science or engineering.
Fantastic. Well, great. Great to hear from all of you. So Chris, I guess we'll wrap it up. Any last words you'd like to share?
I would. First of all, I want to ask each one of you, what is the one thing that you would like to see change in about, I would say, 5-6 years' time? What would you really like to see? Okay, we've really moved on and you've had a part to play in that. We'll start with Mia.
I would say that I'd want to see much more equality in terms of the government, how they distribute their money, what they use their money for, because here's an example, for instance, they've used, I think it's about 6.9 million or billion to paint Buckingham Palace, whereas they could have been using that to give children food. And it's horrendous that they're using money for such stupid things when there's so much, there's people dying in the world.
Yeah.
So I'd say in a few years' time, I'd really want to see a better distribution of government money and taxes.
Anneli?
I really want to see like the education system changing because at the moment it's just very.
I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that? It cut out just a little bit.
Well, I would like to see a change in the education system. I think it's very based on always getting the top grade and exams and everything. It's not taking in people being creative and like the physical element of things. And it's like one exam at the end of a 2-year course isn't teaching you much about actual real life. And if at school we were actually taught about how to save money, how to set up a bank account, and all little things like that, how to buy a house and everything, I think we could be much better and well prepared to go out and speak our mind and really make a change.
Sally?
My point is kind of related to what Mia said about government, but I would definitely love to see in the future a diversity of mindset in the government, not necessarily of, both of mindset and of cultures and races and genders would be great, but definitely of mindset, because we can see people in the government that might be, of a different ethnic background, but they all think the same, which doesn't get anything changed. So definitely people with a wider sense of understanding of the world, in positions where they can actually make change and not just backbenchers or, just there to make the whole government look diverse. So yeah.
Thank you. Sarah Jane?
I agree with what Anneli said there. I think there should be a continual assessment in school rather than one exam at the end of the 4 years here in Ireland anyway. And I think much better rights for women and the same pay as men would be amazing.
Definitely. Helen?
Yeah.
I think that instead of seeing a widening education gap and child poverty being on the rise, having that reversed, seeing, decline in that, seeing, positive change being put into place to change that. And also acceptance that diversity benefits everyone and not just the minority, but rather it's benefiting the whole of society instead of just a few people.
Thank you so much. And on that last note, I will wrap up and say thank you so much to, and I want you to give a good wave here, Mia, Anneli, Sally, Sarah Jane, Helen. You all have had amazing voices. You're passionate, your perseverance, your authenticity, genuineness is something that's really going to help the young voices out there. We so appreciate you being part of the GW4W membership and family. On behalf of the senior leadership team at GW4W, thank you again. And in the words from Michelle Obama, there is no limit to what we as women can accomplish.
Go through. And we invite you to look at all our heart-to-heart conversations coming up after this amazing conversation. We'll be having global HR leaders talking about the changing language of leadership. And we're excited that in December, we'll have 2 heart-to-heart conversations, one on women's sexuality and a second companion to women's leadership building. We hope you'll join us for all of them. We invite you to be part of the GW4W family, and we know that when we come together, we can create a more sustainable world. We look forward to seeing all of you in our next heart-to-heart conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.